Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I make experimental art videos as a side project. 4 years ago, I created this piece where I explored vulnerability in human form. There were a few minutes where I appeared nude, but it was artistic and meaningful to me. I posted it on a secure platform behind a paywall, thinking only serious collectors and fellow artists would see it. Within weeks, screenshots started popping up everywhere. Random forums, sketchy websites, even sent directly to my social media. Most people I could handle through takedown requests and reports, but this one guy was different. He wasn't just sharing my work without permission, he was completely obsessed with it. It started when he followed every single one of my social media accounts. Then came the direct messages. He would send me screenshots of my naked body, with creepy texts telling me he had my video and there was nothing I could do about it. He always added those gross smirking emojis that made my skin crawl. This creep somehow managed to download my video from the protected website. He didn't just steal it though, he bragged about it on underground forums, describing exactly how he got past the security. He treated it like some kind of trophy. But things got so much worse. He started making these weird compilation videos using clips from my art piece. He would edit them together with random music and post them on his YouTube channel and different subreddits. The comments were always a nightmare of perverted remarks and requests for more. Then he did something that still makes me sick. He actually paid some adult content creator to recreate my art scene. He sent her screenshots as reference material and got her to make a custom video copying my work. When I found that video, I couldn't eat for 2 days. Recently, he started making memes with my face. Just random bizarre images with my photo that he would spam across different platforms. It was like he was trying to turn me into some internet joke. I had enough. I sent him a message telling him I had pressed charges, which was true. I filed reports with local police and federal authorities. But legal stuff moves slowly and my message did nothing to stop him. If anything, he seemed to think it was funny. He probably thought he was safe hiding behind fake usernames. He figured nobody could ever connect his online harassment to his real identity. What he didn't know was that I have a computer science background and way too much free time. I started digging. Every forum post, every comment, every video upload left digital breadcrumbs. This guy made mistake after mistake and I followed every single one. I cross-referenced usernames, analyzed posting patterns, and traced his activities across multiple platforms. It took me 3 weeks of obsessive searching, but I found him. I discovered all his online aliases and tracked down his real name, his face, his neighborhood, and even his IP address. I knew what games he played, what devices he used, and thanks to his public activity on certain forums, I learned way more about his personal preferences than I ever wanted to know. The breakthrough came when I was going through old emails in my business inbox. There it was, a message from 4 years ago with his full legal name in the signature. He probably forgot he ever contacted me, but I never forget anything when I'm focused like this. When I finally saw his photo, I almost laughed. This internet tough guy, who had been terrorizing me for months, was just some baby-faced kid who looked like he still lived with his parents. All that threatening behavior, all those creepy messages, and this was the person behind them. He looked like he would cry if someone raised their voice at him. I decided it was time for payback. I took his profile photo and created a simple meme. Nothing too fancy, just his face with text that made it clear I knew exactly who he was. Then I sent it to him through the same platform he had been using to harass me. The response was immediate and beautiful. Within minutes, his 3-year-old Reddit account was gone. Just completely deleted. His YouTube channel disappeared next, followed by his other social media profiles. This guy who spent months making me feel unsafe and violated was now scrambling to erase his own digital footprint. I imagine he's still checking over his shoulder, wondering what else I might know about him. He spent all this time thinking he was anonymous and untouchable, sending me threatening messages about how I couldn't stop him. Now he knows I found him once and I can find him again. I didn't have to do anything illegal or morally questionable. I just used the same internet skills he thought made him so clever, except I actually knew what I was doing. His own carelessness and overconfidence led me right to him. Since then, the harassment has completely stopped. No more stolen videos, no more creepy messages, no more memes with my face. My 4 buddies and I have been renting this house together since we graduated college 2 years ago. The place works perfectly for us because we figured out early on that democracy keeps everyone happy. Anytime there's a disagreement about house rules, cleaning schedules, or even when quiet hours should start on weeknights, we just vote on it. Simple majority wins. It's kept us drama-free this whole time. Last month, one of my buddies moved out to get a place with his girlfriend. Before he left, he found someone to take over his lease through a friend of a friend. The new guy seemed cool enough during the brief meet and greet we did. He was polite, paid his deposit on time, and seemed like he'd fit in fine. All 5 of us original roommates met through our college wrestling team. We spent 4 years changing clothes, showering, and basically living in each other's space during training camps and competitions. Because of that, we're all pretty comfortable around each other. Nobody's walking around completely naked or anything weird like that, but we definitely don't think twice about hanging out in our boxers while watching TV or walking to the bathroom in just underwear after a shower. I'll admit I'm probably the most casual about it. After work, I usually just strip down to my boxers and stay that way until I go to bed. It's comfortable, the house gets warm in summer, and honestly, none of us ever cared. My roommates do the same thing to varying degrees. About 3 weeks after the new guy moved in, he approached all of us with what he called a formal request. He explained that he was uncomfortable seeing us in our underwear around the house and wanted to propose a new rule requiring everyone to stay fully clothed in common areas. We told him we'd vote on it like we do with everything else. When we sat down that weekend for our monthly house meeting, he presented his case. He argued that it made him uncomfortable and that he thought it was inappropriate for grown men to be walking around in their underwear where everyone could see. The rest of us talked it over, and honestly, we didn't see the big deal. We've been living this way for 2 years without any issues. When we voted, it was 4 against 1. No clothing rule. I could tell he wasn't happy about it, but I figured he'd adjust. To be considerate, I did start throwing on shorts or a t-shirt more often when I knew he was around. But I wasn't going to completely change how I lived in my own house, especially first thing in the morning or late at night when I was just grabbing something from my room. Then things started getting weird. The new guy stopped giving us heads up when he was bringing people over, even though that had always been our standard courtesy. I'd be sitting on the couch in my boxers watching Netflix, and suddenly he'd walk in with 3 or 4 people from his work or wherever. They'd all stop and stare, and I'd have to excuse myself to go put clothes on. The first couple times this happened, I figured maybe he forgot to text the group chat. But when I mentioned it to him, I suggested he give us a quick heads up so I could throw something on beforehand. He just rolled his eyes and muttered something about how I shouldn't be dressed like that anyway. My roommate, who's also pretty casual about clothing, started running into the same problem. We'd be caught off guard by random visitors and end up having to awkwardly excuse ourselves to get dressed while his friends stood there looking uncomfortable. After about 2 weeks of this, I started to suspect he was doing it on purpose. The timing was always when one of us was most likely to be underdressed. He'd bring people over right when we usually got home from work and changed, or on weekend mornings when we were just hanging out. Then last Thursday, everything became crystal clear. I was in the kitchen making lunch in just my boxers when he walked in with 2 of his co-workers. They both did the awkward look-away thing while I grabbed my plate and started heading to my room to put clothes on. He called out for me to wait and said he wanted to talk to me and my other roommate for a second. He nodded toward my roommate who'd just come out of his room in his underwear and immediately froze when he saw the visitors. I told him sure and started to say I'd grab some shorts real quick, but he stopped me and said this was actually perfect. He wanted to ask us something. Then he asked if his little plan to shame us into wearing clothes had been working. My roommate and I just stared at him. His co-workers looked like they wanted to disappear. My roommate asked what plan he was talking about. The new guy then explained that he'd been deliberately bringing people over when he knew we'd be walking around half naked. He figured if enough people saw us like this and gave us weird looks, we'd finally get embarrassed enough to stop doing it. This guy had been intentionally trying to humiliate us in our own house because he didn't like the outcome of our democratic vote. I asked if he'd really been trying to embarrass us on purpose. He confirmed it and said it seemed like it was working because we both looked pretty uncomfortable right then. Then I started laughing. I told him we weren't embarrassed and that we were in shape for a reason. I said I wasn't ashamed of how I looked. My roommate nodded in agreement and told him that if he wanted us to change our habits, he should have brought better arguments to the vote instead of trying to manipulate us. The new guy's face went red. His co-workers were clearly mortified and started making excuses to leave. After they hurried out, he completely lost it. He started yelling that we were disgusting and that normal people don't walk around like this. He said he shouldn't have to see our bodies every time he came home. I told him that maybe he should have thought about that before moving into a house with 4 guys who've been living this way for 2 years. I reminded him that he knew what our voting system was, that he participated in it, and that he lost. I told him to deal with it. He walked off to his room and slammed the door. For the next few days, he spent his time complaining to our other 2 roommates, trying to get them to change their votes or override our decision somehow. He kept insisting that what we were doing was inappropriate and that he shouldn't have to endure seeing us in our underwear. Our other roommates shut him down every time. They pointed out that he'd agreed to our house rules when he moved in, including our voting system. They also mentioned that his manipulation tactics were way more inappropriate than anything we'd been doing. The situation came to a head this past Sunday during our monthly house meeting. The new guy demanded we revisit the clothing rule vote, claiming that his research over the past few weeks had proven his point about how uncomfortable it made people. I asked what he meant by research and if he was talking about deliberately ambushing us with visitors to try to embarrass us. He said he was proving that normal people find our behavior inappropriate. My second roommate told him that what was inappropriate was him trying to manipulate and humiliate his housemates instead of respecting a democratic decision. My third roommate agreed and said it was seriously messed up, especially since we all agreed to majority rule when he moved in. The new guy tried to argue that we should take another vote, but this time our other 2 roommates voted against the clothing rule as well, 5-0. He said this was ridiculous and that he wasn't going to live in a house where grown men walk around in their underwear. My fourth roommate told him to find somewhere else to live then. He went quiet for a moment, then tried a different approach. He said fine, and that if we weren't going to be reasonable about this, then he was implementing his own rules. He announced that he was going to start bringing people over whenever he wanted without warning. He said if we didn't like being seen in our underwear, then we should put some clothes on. I suggested we vote on whether surprise guests should be allowed. I called for all in favor of maintaining our current courtesy rule about giving heads up before bringing people over. 4 hands went up immediately. I announced that the motion carried and told him he could bring people over, but he needed to give us notice like everyone else does. I warned him that if he couldn't respect that basic courtesy, we'd vote on whether he was a good fit for this house. The new guy realized he was completely outnumbered and backed down, but he's been sulking ever since. Yesterday I found out from one of our neighbors that he's been telling people in the building that we're creepy and inappropriate and that he's trapped living with exhibitionists. The neighbor thought it was funny because she's seen us bringing in groceries or checking the mail in normal clothes and couldn't figure out what he was talking about. I'm pretty sure he's going to end up moving out soon, which honestly would solve everyone's problems. Our house worked perfectly for 2 years before he showed up with his demands and manipulation tactics. If he'd just been honest about his discomfort and asked us to maybe be a little more mindful when he had guests coming over, we probably would have been happy to accommodate him. I was desperate to make some money after my husband got laid off from his construction job. We had been living paycheck to paycheck before he lost his job, and now we were falling behind on everything. The baby formula alone was costing us $60 a week, and our rent was due in 5 days. I decided to sell some of the expensive baby items we had received as shower gifts. The high-end stroller was the most valuable thing we owned that we could actually part with. It was one of those fancy travel systems that cost over $400 new. I posted it on a local selling app for $200, which I thought was fair since we had barely used it. Within an hour, I got several messages, but one woman seemed really desperate. She kept texting me every few minutes, asking if it was still available and when we could meet. Her messages were getting more urgent as the day went on, saying she needed it immediately for her son. I told her I would be at Riverside Park around noon with my 8-month-old daughter so she could see it in person. That morning, I packed up the stroller along with all its accessories and the original manual. I also brought our old umbrella stroller that we got at a yard sale for $10. It was basic but functional, and I needed something to push my daughter around in. When I got to the park around 11:45, I found a bench near the playground. My daughter was in a good mood, babbling and pointing at the other kids playing. I was hoping this sale would go smoothly because we really needed that $200. At 12:15, a woman approached me looking frantic. She was probably in her mid-30s with unwashed hair and wrinkled clothes. She had no child with her, which immediately struck me as odd. She asked if I was the person selling the stroller from the online listing. I confirmed I was and asked if she was the woman who had been messaging me all morning. She said yes, and that she had been driving around looking for me for the past 20 minutes. She explained that her son was starting daycare on Monday and they required parents to bring their own strollers for outdoor activities. She started examining the stroller carefully, checking all the safety features and testing how it folded. I could tell she really wanted it, but when I mentioned the price again, her whole attitude changed. She said $200 was way more than she could afford as a single mother. I felt sorry for her situation, but I explained that we were also struggling financially. My husband had been out of work for 6 weeks and we were behind on our bills. She offered me $75, saying that was literally all the cash she had. I told her I couldn't accept less than $175 because we owed that exact amount to our landlord. She started getting agitated and said I was being unreasonable. She pointed at my umbrella stroller and said I obviously didn't need such an expensive one. I tried to explain that the umbrella stroller was our only other option and we needed to keep it. She started raising her voice, saying that some people were just too greedy to help others in need. Other parents at the park were starting to stare at us. I suggested we could meet again when she had more money, but she refused. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She announced she was taking the stroller whether I agreed or not. Before I could process what was happening, she grabbed my daughter right out of the expensive stroller. She lifted her up roughly and placed her on the concrete curb like she was moving a package. I was so shocked that someone would actually touch my baby that I froze for a second. Then I rushed toward my daughter, demanding that this woman leave us alone. When I bent down to pick up my baby, the woman shoved me hard in the back. I fell forward onto the pavement, skinning both my knees and the palms of my hands. My daughter started crying loudly, probably scared by seeing me fall. While I was struggling to get back up, the woman grabbed the stroller and started running toward the parking lot. I scooped up my crying daughter and yelled for help as loudly as I could. A man who had been jogging on the nearby trail heard me screaming and saw what was happening. He immediately started chasing after her. The woman was trying to run while pushing the stroller, but it was slowing her down significantly. She kept looking back over her shoulder, which made her trip slightly a couple of times. The jogger was gaining on her quickly. When he got close enough, he kicked at her ankles from behind while she was running. She went down hard, landing face first on the asphalt pathway. The stroller rolled several feet away from her and tipped over. She was screaming and holding her face, which was now bleeding from scrapes on her forehead and nose. She kept yelling that the jogger had assaulted her and she was going to sue him. The jogger held her down and told someone to call 911. By this time, several other park visitors had gathered around to see what was happening. A woman with her own children came over to help me with my daughter. She brought me some wet wipes to clean the blood off my scraped hands. The park security arrived first, followed by two police officers about 10 minutes later. The woman who had stolen my stroller was still on the ground, now handcuffed and complaining loudly. She kept insisting that I had agreed to give her the stroller and that this was all a misunderstanding. One of the officers asked her to show him any proof of our agreement. She couldn't provide any text messages or receipts. When the officer asked to see my phone, I showed him all of her messages from that morning. They clearly showed her asking to buy the stroller, with no mention of me agreeing to give it away. The officer also took statements from 3 witnesses who had seen the entire incident. The woman was charged with theft, assault, and endangering a child. When they put her in the back of the police car, she was still yelling about how unfair the whole situation was. The jogger who had helped me turned out to be an off-duty firefighter named Marcus. He stayed with me until my husband arrived to pick us up. Marcus helped me check the stroller for any damage, but surprisingly, it was perfectly fine. He also made sure my daughter hadn't been hurt when the woman grabbed her. My husband was furious when he heard what happened. He wanted to press additional charges, but the officer said what we had was already pretty serious. The woman ended up pleading guilty 3 weeks later. She was sentenced to 30 days in jail and had to pay restitution for my medical bills from treating my scraped knees. We never did sell that stroller after all. My husband found a new job 2 weeks later, so we didn't need the money as desperately. When I got moved to the corner desk by the office door, I figured it would be quiet. The desk sat right next to the main walkway to the restrooms, and apparently my corner had become everyone's personal pit stop. It started innocently enough. Someone would set their coffee down while adjusting their jacket, or place their water bottle there while checking their phone. But then it became a daily routine. It was always the same group of people. There was this one guy from accounting who would slam his energy drink down so hard it made my monitor shake. A woman from marketing who left sticky ring marks from her iced coffee. And Karen from human resources, yes, that's what everyone called her because she lived up to every stereotype, who would plop down her oversized smoothie like she owned the place. At first, I tried being polite about it. I asked the accounting guy if he could avoid leaving drinks on my desk because I needed the space to work. He said sure, no problem. But the next day, there was his Red Bull again, sweating condensation all over my paperwork. I tried different approaches. I put up a small sign that said, "Please keep desk clear, thank you." Karen actually laughed when she saw it and called it cute but passive-aggressive. Then she set her green smoothie right on top of the sign. The drink situation was only half the problem. These same people had decided that cutting through my corner workspace was faster than walking around the proper way. They would squeeze between my chair and the wall, constantly bumping into me, jostling my arm while I was typing, or knocking into my chair back. One day, a accounting guy bumped me so hard while I was drinking water that I spilled it all over my keyboard. He just mumbled sorry and kept walking. That's when I decided enough was enough. I went to the supply closet and grabbed an extra wastebasket. I positioned it right at the end of my desk where people usually put their drinks. The next time someone left their beverage and walked away, I simply picked it up and dropped it in the trash. When accounting guy came back from the bathroom, he looked around confused. He asked if I had seen his drink that he left right there. I apologized and told him I didn't realize it was his. I explained that I just saw some trash on my desk and cleaned it up because I needed to keep my workspace clear to get my job done. He said it wasn't trash, but a full can of Red Bull. I apologized again for the misunderstanding and suggested maybe he could hold on to it next time. He was annoyed but couldn't really argue with my logic. After all, who leaves their drink on someone else's desk? The pattern continued. Every abandoned beverage went straight into my trash waste basket. Karen was furious when her $20 smoothie disappeared. She demanded to know if I threw away her smoothie and reminded me how much it cost. I apologized for the confusion and explained that I just clear any items left on my desk since I need the space for work. I told her I had no way of knowing whose it was or if it was abandoned. She insisted it was obviously not abandoned and that it was sitting right there. I said I understood her frustration and suggested that perhaps keeping her drink with her would prevent future mix-ups. She walked off, but I noticed she stopped leaving drinks on my desk after that. The bumping situation required a different strategy. These people had gotten so comfortable using my corner as a shortcut that they barely looked where they were going. So I started making myself more present in the space. Whenever I heard footsteps approaching, I would suddenly need something from my side filing cabinet. This required me to roll my chair back and turn sideways to access the files. It was amazing how often I needed those files. Pretty much every time someone tried to cut through. The first time accounting guy walked right into my chair legs, he yelped in surprise and told me to watch where I was going. I apologized and asked if he was okay. I explained that I was just getting a file and didn't hear him coming. I offered to write up an accident report. He quickly said no and that he was fine, but suggested I look before moving my chair next time. I agreed but mentioned that this filing cabinet was part of my daily workflow. I suggested that maybe using the main walkway would be safer for everyone. He rubbed his shin and took the long way around after that. Karen was the next victim. She was speed walking through, probably late from one of her extended lunch breaks, when she collided with my chair. The impact sent her stumbling forward. I immediately asked if she was hurt and said it looked like a hard hit. I told her we should definitely document this incident and asked if she needed ice or if I should call a manager. I was already pulling out paperwork and reaching for my phone. She insisted she was fine and told me to just be more careful. I said of course and that I felt terrible. I offered to walk her back to her desk to make sure she was okay and mentioned we should follow protocol for workplace accidents. The thought of paperwork and manager involvement made her backpedal quickly. She said that wasn't necessary and that she was perfectly fine. But I noticed she started taking the long way around too. The marketing woman was the last holdout. She had this habit of rushing through while texting, never looking up from her phone. When she finally met my chair legs, she nearly dropped her device and asked what the hell happened. I apologized immediately and explained I was reaching for important client files. I asked if she was injured and mentioned this was exactly why we have workplace safety protocols. I offered to get the incident report forms so we could document everything properly. She quickly said no and to forget it because she was fine. I asked if she was sure and explained that liability is serious business. I said I'd hate for her to have an injury that develops into something worse, and that the company really needs to know about these kinds of accidents. She was already backing away and shaking her head. She insisted she was totally fine and no paperwork was needed. After that, she joined the others in using the proper walkways. Within 2 weeks, my corner had returned to the peaceful workspace I'd hoped for. No more drink rings on my desk, no more getting bumped while trying to work, no more having to clean up other people's messes. A month later, there was a company-wide email about keeping workspaces clear and using designated walkways. Apparently, several people had complained about safety hazards in the office layout. They never figured out that their own shortcuts were the real hazard. 6 months back, I was broke and desperate for work. My last job ended when the company went under, and I'd been unemployed for 3 months. Bills were piling up and my savings account hit zero. When the temp agency called about a factory position, I didn't even ask about the pay, I just said yes. The stamping department was nothing like I expected. Huge machines slammed down on sheets of metal all day, making parts for cars. The noise was incredible and the air smelled like hot oil and steel. On my first day, the foreman showed me around. He was an older guy with gray hair and permanent grease stains on his shirt. He explained my job at press number 7. Load a metal plank, hit the green button, wait for the press to stamp it into shape, remove the part, repeat. He told me to keep my safety glasses on and never put my hands near the press when it was coming down. Then he said something strange. He told me not to lend any money to Sherwood. Just like that, as casually as mentioning where the bathroom was. Then he walked away. I stood there wondering who this Sherwood person was and why anyone would think I'd lend him money. I barely knew anyone here. Was this some kind of department joke I wasn't getting? The first few hours went by slowly. The work was simple but loud. I couldn't really talk to anyone over the sound of the machines. During my first break, I sat alone in the break room with a cup of coffee. That's when someone slid into the chair across from me. He was maybe 40 years old with thinning hair and a smile that seemed too friendly, like a salesman trying to hit his monthly numbers. He told me I must be the new guy, I'll press 7, and welcome me to the department. He said I'd love working here because it was a great group of people who all looked out for each other. Something about how he said that last part made me think of the foreman's warning. He went on to say that was actually what he wanted to talk about. He explained he was in a tough spot because his kid needed medicine and he was short $60 until payday on Friday. He said he knew we just met but hoped maybe I could help him out. He told me he was good for it and said to ask anyone. That's when it clicked. I told him he must be Sherwood. His friendly expression changed for just a second, like I caught him off guard. He asked how I knew his name and who told me. I said it was just a lucky guess. I got up and left him sitting there. For the rest of the week, I watched Sherwood work. He had a system. First, he'd look for targets, usually new people, or anyone who seemed like they might be sympathetic. Then he'd approach them, always friendly and casual, building up fake friendship. His stories changed, depending on who he was talking to. Sometimes it was medicine for his kid, other times car repairs, unexpected bills, or money for groceries. Always urgent, always a small amount, always promising to pay back by Friday. I saw him get money from at least 3 different people that week. Each time they handed over cash, looking sympathetic, probably feeling good about helping a coworker. Friday came and went. I never saw Sherwood pay anyone back. The next Monday, he tried a different approach with me. He said he'd been thinking about last week and that he probably came on too strong, asking for money right away. He said he understood we didn't know each other then. I just listened. He continued that now we'd worked together for a week and I'd seen he was reliable, showed up every day, did his job. So he hoped maybe we could try this again. He told me his landlord was threatening eviction and he needed $200 by Wednesday. He said he knew it was more than before, but he was really desperate. I told him no. He kept pushing, saying he'd pay me back with interest. 20% interest, he said. That was $40 profit for me, just for being a good guy. I said still no. His friendly mask dropped completely. He asked what was wrong with me and said he was offering me free money. A 20% return in less than a week, he said. I'd have to be an idiot to pass that up. I told him maybe I'd have to be an idiot to fall for it. He got defensive and asked what I meant by fall for it. He said this was legitimate and told me to ask anyone in the department because he always paid people back. I looked around the break room. 3 other guys sat at nearby tables, all pretending they weren't listening. I recognized 2 of them as people Sherwood had borrowed money from the week before. I called out and asked if Sherwood had paid them back from last week. The silence was loud. None of them would look at me. Sherwood said this was ridiculous and that I was embarrassing him in front of his co-workers. I told him he was embarrassing himself. He stormed out, but that wasn't the end. Over the next few days, Sherwood kept trying different angles. He offered to sell me his watch at a huge discount. He said he had insider information about overtime opportunities but would only share it if I helped him out first. He even tried to get me to co-sign for a loan at some payday place. The answer was always no. By the end of my second week, word had spread around the department about how I wouldn't fall for Sherwood's tricks. Other workers started coming up to me, sharing their own stories about money they'd lent him and never seen again. This had been going on for years. He always found new victims to keep it going. That Friday, the foreman pulled me aside. He asked how I was settling in. I said pretty well. He said good, then asked if Sherwood had tried to hit me up for money. I said multiple times. He said, but I didn't fall for it. I said no and thanked him for the warning on day 1. He told me he gave that warning to everyone new. I was the first person in 3 years who listened. The following Monday, Sherwood didn't show up for work. Or Tuesday. Wednesday morning, the foreman told us Sherwood had been fired for attendance issues. Turns out he'd been calling in sick to work other schemes around town, hitting up people at different factories and businesses. Someone finally connected the dots and reported him to human resources. When I watched them pack up Sherwood's locker, I thought about being broke and desperate myself just a few months ago. I understood what it felt like to need money badly. But there was a difference between being in real trouble and running a scam on people who were just trying to help. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.